Aloha! Welcome to today's presentation. I'm JayDreamerZ. As many of you know, I research plasma physics and I apply what I learned to the ancient times, the olden days, times long forgotten, Auld Lang Syne, or what I call ancient Oblivion. Now, one of my particular areas of interest is the Dark Ages, or what has been come to be coined as the Dark Ages, when in reality, I believe, and I found evidence for it actually being an age of light. Light all over the place, strange cosmic lights that were glowing from the heavens, and terrestrial, magnificent beams, pillars, columns that seemed to hold up the sky as they exploded up out of caves and volcanoes and shot upwards and spiraled up as the staff of Hermes and other ways that they were cartoonified. Now, as I was doing my research, I came across this image. To me, as somebody that also breaks down the truth in the movies, the Eye of Sauron immediately came to mind from the Lord of the Rings. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'll just tell you that this right here is the Eye of Sauron, right behind me. Now, what is the Eye of Sauron? Right? It basically represents the all-seeing eye of evil, something that has its eye on every part of the world and can see everyone all at one time. That's because this eye is located at the very top of the world, at the middle of the firmament. It's a part of what I call the apex dome. But what does this eye have to do with the Middle Ages? What does this eye have to do with Jesus Christ? Well, keep in mind also we live during what I call the season of Satan, a time whenever the energy is being siphoned from the surface world and sucked down into the heart of the earth, the bowels of the earth. So we're constantly losing a lot of energy, and therefore the things that used to be true have been flipped on their heads, upside down. Truth has become a lie, lie has become truth, and so on and so forth. Now, that all-seeing eye, that evil entity, is constantly searching for what's known as the Ring of Power. That's because it's directly above this particular ring. That ring represents the ultimate power, which is the Garden of Eden, or Hyperborea. And I believe that the powers that be in this world, those who are possessed and filled with this evil energy, that they're constantly looking for paradise, that it's a real place. They're looking for the fountain of youth. And they have become altogether lost after being kicked out of the Garden of Eden long ago, or their ancestors being kicked out of the Garden of Eden long ago. But I'm going to make a connection here between Jesus and the Eye of Sauron. First, we need to take a look at the inversion and understand what Sauron means. What does the name mean, actually, right? Here's some symbolism that I've shared with you guys a few times before. First, you can see that the Eye of Sauron is placed atop a tower. In the Elven language, that tower is called basically the Dark Tower or the Black Tower, and it's a type of Mount Maru. Mount Maru at the center of the world is called Rupus Nigra, or the Dark Rock, the dark, high and lofty rock, or the Black Tower, right? People have all of these things that people see or have seen in ancient times come from the north, okay? Sometimes there's anomalies out here in what I call the Southlands, which I got from the Lord of the Rings, actually. But people looked northward and they saw great, terrible destruction, fiery serpents, beams of light, swords standing tall in the sky, unmoving, unwavering, what seemed like armies fighting each other up there in the atmosphere. And as you can see, this Eye of Sauron, if I can zoom into it here, it's not actually fire, but electricity, right? It's plasma, which is what this is, right? Electricity is a form of plasma or electromagnetics. And this is different than the Renaissance version of it. It's actually two different things, and I'm going to show you the difference between the two. All right, sweet. So that's the Eye of Sauron, the ultimate evil. Now, I came across this while researching. I want to explain to you what Sauron means. I know some people just say, oh, it's just a made-up language. J.R.R. Tolkien just made up his own elvish language or whatever. I don't believe that anything is truly made up. I believe that all of these things are rooted in ancient Hebrew and Phoenician, which essentially, going back far enough, they're the exact same language and the same alphabet. Now, Sauron is two words, Sar, which is this word right here, and then on, which means of thee, or one of thee, or one who, right? So Saur, just like Shar Shalom, is another epithet for Jesus. It means Prince of Peace, right? Sar means prince or ruler. So Sauron is one who rules over, or one who is the ruler of, right? Just like Jesus is the Prince of Peace, or the ruler of peace. Whenever Jesus is here, we go through 1,000 years, that might be a hyperbole or whatnot, but it's 1,000 years of light. It's 1,000 years of goodness, and it's known as the millennial rule or the millennial reign. Now, this is the actual image, and there's many of these. I'm going to show you all kinds, right? This wasn't a one-off anomaly during the Dark Ages. And I also want to say this. The Dark Ages, just to remind you, was a time of light, right? Sound check in the chat if you guys can hear me okay. The Dark Ages was a time of light, strange lights, not sunlight like we have today, in that point of focus that revolves around over our world. It was a time of enlightenment when people knew the mysteries that are hidden from us today, right? What we call occult today, back then was, it seems to me like something that was more widely known and more better understood than it is today, because the conditions of our world were altogether different, right? So oftentimes you'll see this image right here, which looks like an eye with like a slit, like a reptilian looking eye or something, right? So at first it could strike you as evil, even being red and stuff too. But it's always paired with these pillars and staffs and the very cross or cruciform itself. It was never mentioned in a negative context, in a bad context. As a matter of fact, it was always mentioned as something that brought life to the world. And it was always connected with the story of Jesus of Nazareth. And there's many different depictions of it. And I'm going to share a couple of those right now. Sometimes they would put a heart right there in the middle. And if we take a closer look at this heart and we zoom in on it, you can actually see that there's other things along with this heart. Now, other people will see other body parts, okay? I'm not one of those people that immediately sees private parts of males or females or whatnot, okay? I don't do phallus worship or, see other body parts in other places. If you do, fine, okay? But I do not. And not only that, but we're made in the image of God, right? And these entities, these anomalies that are electromagnetic in nature, they oftentimes look like us, but the reality is we look like them because we have a spirit body that matches the ones that we have seen in ancient times. So over here, I'm going to point out these things that look like they're bleeding off to the sides, right? These are known as the wounds of Christ. So whenever Jesus was hung on the cross, he had a stigmata. His hands were pierced, his feet were pierced. Now, the feet were actually not together, okay? Originally, they were actually separated because this is more of like an X shape, right? It's the squatter man symbol with the arms up and the legs squatting and bowing outwards, just like Atlas. I'm going to come back to these and explain my theory on what those represent. Here's some other ones where you can see angels holding up this sheath or this sheet that seems to have the same exact image on it. And you can see them displaying it for the people who are reading this book. These are books that have altogether mostly been lost. Many of the Dark Age books and manuscripts have been hidden away, and most of them have, the elite have been looking for them and collecting them and keeping them in reserves in their great libraries. For example, the Smithsonian, the Vatican, etc., and so on and so forth. Here's another one where it's got this heart right there in the middle. And they don't always put these images. Now, pay close attention to this because you'll see petroglyphs that replicate these images, okay? So right here, you can see sometimes this is drawn, these things in the middle are drawn as a hand. And people, survivors of those post-apocalyptic times, they would use their hand because it was easier because it looked like a hand, so they would trace out their hand or whatever, and you see a lot of hand petroglyphs. This is where that comes from, okay? Now, here's another version of it. Sometimes it's not this, this is called the Vesica Piscis. I wonder if anyone in the chat said that yet. This is called the Vesica Piscis, this shape right here, okay? And I'm going to explain that to you as well. But sometimes it wasn't drawn as round and circular. Sometimes it was more of a diamond. And then they have these off to the side. Pay close attention to these as well, the shapes. These are not just random decorations. Little circles with lines going up to another circle, going up to another circle. You see that? You're going to see these in some petroglyphs that I'll be sharing with you, where they also show you the Eye of Sauron, okay? So let's talk about this Vesica Piscis. Now, first and foremost, I'll tell you what it means. I like to study the origin of words, the etymology and the roots of words, what they originally meant. The word Vesica essentially means balloon. It means something that is filled up like a balloon, okay? By extension, over time, the implication became bladder. Pisces just means fish. Does this look like a fish bladder? I don't know. I don't take fish apart and look at their insides. But this was something that was seen in the sky, in the heavens, during a time when the atmosphere was electrically amplified. And there was something else going on that made it look like it was a fish, or at least this was a part of a fish. It was the vesica, the balloon part, because it was floating up there in the air, up in the heavens. Here you can see Jesus once again right next to it, showing you that these are one and the same. Some people will say this is the wound of Jesus whenever he was stabbed with the spear of destiny and, you know, it was put into his side or into his ribs or his midsection. And I'll explain that to you as well. But hopefully by the end of this video, all of this will make much more sense to you. Here's another Golden Age image. Oftentimes, I mean, not Golden Age, Dark Ages, okay? Now, the Dark Ages and the Golden Age, to me, are the same. These are cyclical. The Golden Age happens time and time and time again. These are epics, eons, or as Tolkien calls it, ages. There's different ages. We go back and forth as the polarity shifts back and forth. Also, it's interesting of note that when Tolkien wrote his prequel, his very first book that describes the world of the Lord of the Rings, that world was flat, always. It was a plane of existence. It was not spherical or round or anything until after the first age. So there was 3 main ages in these books. After the first age, mankind at this special island, they rebelled against the elven race, and Tolkien, or the god in the book called Iluvatar, he wanted to keep this special paradise place that was meant for the elves away from the human race. And so he changed the shape of the world. At least that's how the book says it. And he made the world, at the very least, so that in the minds of the people, and this is me commenting on it, they thought it was spherical. And therefore, now because it's spherical, paradise cannot be reached. The place where you see this image is off limits. There's no one has access to it because everyone knows in their mind the shape of the world is different. However, if you ask those who lived in the first age in Tolkien's books, they knew exactly where it was because they knew the true shape of the world they lived in. Sometimes they'll show Jesus in the middle. Other times, they'll show Mary, right? And pay attention to the colors and the color scheme. Notice the background up here. This is the sky in the background. During the Dark Ages, they drew the sky as gold. This is why it was a golden age, okay? We go through color spectrum shifts in this world. We're going through one right now. Most people don't pick up on that or realize that the sun is changing color and the moon is changing color and the stars are changing color because it's the quintessential frog boiling away in the pot, and it just gets used to the gradual increase of heat. We have gotten used to the gradual changing of colors and stuff, so we don't really notice it. Some people are noticing it here towards the end times, though, because it's happening faster and faster. Here's another version of the same thing. You also have the slit right there, and this is supposed to be blood pouring out. We're going to come back to that blood here in a bit, too. Oftentimes, you'll have angels that are holding this object up. Right? These angels are cherubs. They're cherubim. They're the covering angels. And they're the exact same thing, symbolically, as the other wounds that we showed pictured before. 2 wounds on either side up here for the hands, right? 2 wounds on the bottom for the feet, right? The stigmata. Now here it is again, this sort of a diamond shape. Many times, strange and mysterious shapes were seen in antiquity, especially in the Middle Ages. Nuremberg is a classic example of this, when people literally saw plasmoids and balls of light moving back and forth, strange objects, dark objects in the sky, right? People were witnessing an apocalyptic event. They were witnessing a cataclysm, a polarity shift, a reversal in our world. Now here it is again. Now they're very obvious about it, where they put the cross of Jesus, and this wound of Jesus is right there in the middle with his face. I mean, there's no mistaking it. You've got the cat of nine tails, which is also interesting too. Pay attention to this particular shape as well, especially that it's coming down from the hand up here. I'm gonna give you my theory on that. Here's another one where they have Jesus standing there. This is his body in these pictures. Do you see that? That's the body of Jesus, right? It's not just his body and then there's a little slit in the side where somebody had poked him or whatever. This is actually the body of Jesus as it's been depicted in these ancient Middle Age manuscripts. Also, pay close attention to everything that you're looking at. For example, ask what these things are, right? Ask why they chose the colors that they chose. And look at the hand signs. Pay attention to hand signs because they're putting them all over the place, okay? This is a particular hand sign that means something, and you'll see it all throughout ancient paintings, drawings. People will pose using this particular hand sign with the two fingers in the middle connected. There's the famous Flammarion engraving, which was, by the way, not done by Flammarion, but it was just included in his book. No one actually knows who drew that, where it shows like the side of a dome and the character's kind of like lifting up the dome and he's crawling out and he's stretching his hand out. His hand is doing that too. You can find that all over the place. Here it is again with some more angels that are holding up this bed sheet, and this one's got blood just coming off of it in every direction. Why? Because this is the body of Jesus. Jesus' story says that he was tortured, whipped, beaten mercilessly so that there was just blood, and he was almost unrecognizable because of the overabundance of blood that was dripping off and raining down from his body. We'll come back to that. Hey, Eric Ibu Elliott, thank you so much for your donation. All right, here's another one where they clearly put the Vesica Piscis fish, right? The fish balloon or the fish bladder, if you would like to see it that way. This one's kind of messed up over time. And then right above it, you can see that they've got Jesus over here doing the Atlas pose, stretching his arms outwards on the cross. We'll take a look at that again here in just a bit. Now here we have the heart. They associate this with the heart because it's at the heart of the body of Jesus. It's at the central point, okay? This is going to come into play with chakras, and I'm going to show you how the chakras of Jesus were actually depicted and carved into rock because people saw them. People could see the chakras of Jesus. And up here you can actually see they put a picture of Jesus who's holding his heart out, and all these little red dots. Here's the wound right there in the side. And here's all these little dots right here. These are the marks that were on his body, okay? Now, if he represents the light of the world or the blue beam of plasma that I constantly talk about, then we can start to understand what some of these things are within plasma physics and how they could actually physically happen in this world and manifest, and why Jesus will be seen coming in the heavens and in the sky, and why in the ancient times Jesus was portrayed in the Middle Ages quite often as a giant. See this little tiny person down there? You see that huge, gigantic, tall Jesus? That's because Jesus was a titan, essentially, okay? Not like the actual human version of Jesus. I'm talking about the symbolic one of light that I talk about, which comes from Mount Maru. Let's take a closer look at this one here too. So here we have Jesus once again. We've got these 4 wounds, the 5th one in the center being that big rip or that split in the middle, right? And sometimes they'll draw it sideways, sometimes draw it up and down. Okay, people had different perspectives whenever, drawing these things in petroglyphs or during the Middle Ages or whatever. So you have to think about perspective as well. And you have to think about whether or not something was oriented this way or this way, right? Here's another one. So Jesus, or a type of Jesus, right there in the middle. And we've got 4 characters in the exact same places where his wounds are typically depicted around the Vesica Piscis, right? One over here, one here, one here, one here. Every single one of these has wings. Why? Because it's in the sky. because this was seen in the sky, in the heavens. And people interpreted these shapes that they saw as different animals. They cartoonified these things. Here's another one. Let's see, we got, this one's Black Jesus, it looks like, and he's in the middle of the Vesica Piscis once again, floating up in the heavens, as it should be. Here's another one. Now check this one out. This one has Jesus at the very top up here, being crucified. I'm going to show you this image. I'm going to explain these two who are standing on his left and his right. These are an interesting thing to look at, and I'm going to show you what that means. But down here you can see that there's these hands reaching down out of heaven, and then we have this shape. Sometimes this is called the womb, right? The heavenly womb or the cosmic womb, because this is something that produces life. It's a part of what I call the blue beam, or the light of the world, or the terrestrial plasma that erupts out of it. Also, here's a grail. This grail shape is also going to come into play whenever we take a look at these things and their comparisons with a Torus field. Now, here's another one. We can see Mary in the center this time. This is clearly a type of Eye of Sauron eye-looking shape right here. Mary with baby Jesus right here in the center. And they're sort of enveloped by this red plasma sheath, which is what it is, by the way. Right above it, we have the apex dome. This is a part of the firmament. I've shown this many different times too, and if you pay attention, you can do an easy search on ancient drawings of the birth of Jesus, the baptism of Jesus, anything with Jesus, and if he's outside, they're going to have him between two mountains, as you see right here. Right? It's hard to see because everything's yellow, but that's because the atmosphere was yellow, okay? This was during the age when the color spectrum shift was it was in the yellow portion. But up here, this is the firmament bowing down at the center, and this is an opening right here, and this is a beam of light that shoots all the way up to the firmament, which is coming from Jesus and his mother, which is appropriate. And here we got like the 7 dwarves. How many people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 of them. Still, 9 is the Tet. Anyways. I'm just kidding about the 7 dwarfs. All right, now here's flying Jesus. This is the angelic version of Jesus that it's not very popular. You won't find this often, but you can find many different versions of Jesus with these red wings where he's flying up in the heavens and he's blessing people, and there's light coming down from him to other people. And there's always this mountain, these weird, tall, jagged mountain cliffs in the background. The yellow skies, the jagged, tall mountains, these all build context for unveiling the larger picture, the bigger picture of the story. Why is Jesus portrayed like this? This is how the seraphim were portrayed, oftentimes in the Bible, or the fiery ones, right? The ones that look like fire up there in the heavens, heavenly fire. We've got 2 wings that are going down, covering the legs, as you can see down here, right? 2 wings that are coming up. These are actually just the wings that indicate that he's in the air and flying and not falling down. That's how they let people know that they were flying, that they weren't falling. Because if you just draw a person in the air, we naturally would assume that they're falling down from the air, right? Because people don't just fly around. And then these 2 are the wings that go upwards. Let's check out some more. Now here's another version of this. This is from an apocalyptic canon, an apocalyptic text. There are many different apocalyptic texts. I think it would be wise to look into those, okay? They're usually extra-biblical. They're considered pseudepigrapha, or false writings, or not a part of the official canon of the Bible. But people, especially certain saints of times past, looked up. And this guy's actually going through stigmata. As you can see, like all the rays are hitting right where his hands are, right where his side is, right here, down where his feet are. And they're coming from Jesus, who is a fiery angel up in the heavens, who's floating around with these red wings that are just, it looks like a big fat fireball up in the sky. The human part, and he's doing the Atlas pose too. It clearly doesn't have to. You know what I mean? There's no cross or anything that's holding him in that position. But he does have to, because that's the shape that Jesus took. If we say that, you know, Jesus is equal to, or a type of, this pillar of light that shoots up from the earth, from within the earth, whenever the gases in the underworld are released during the depressurization of our atmosphere, the underworld will also depressurize. All those gases shoot up through caverns and caves, and they shoot up in a pillar, but then that pillar separates at the top, and it spreads out, and it creates a bird shape or an angel shape or whatever. Atlas holding up the sky. Now these are not ancient. These are modern photographs of electrical phenomenon in the sky that people, until recently, only very recently, figured out what they were and understood and discovered, or rediscovered, really. These are called sprites. Now let's take a look at these. These are what people saw during the medieval times and the ages before that, every other age alternating. These things happen whenever you have an abundance of electricity in the sky, especially the way higher up above the clouds sky, okay? This is way higher up in the atmosphere than just like lightning and stuff. This is actually what makes lightning way higher up, because the electricity comes from far above the clouds and travels all the way down. It builds up within the clouds and they help to create lightning, but these sprites lasted a long time. In today's world, these are called transient luminous events. That means they happen very quickly. They're little flashes. But whenever you have an atmosphere that's electrically amplified because there's an influx of energy pouring in from a broken dome or a firmament that's been ripped open, and the very earth itself releasing fresh oxygen and new gases that are also being ionized, then the entire atmosphere is electrically charged. And these things are no longer transient. They're no longer quick flashes. These things hang out and they stay and they move about in the heavens. These are cherubs. These are what I believe to be the covering angels, whose wings, sometimes they have a little point in the modern world. Okay, this is actually just a Z-pinch. This is where the plasma comes together right there in the middle. But they branch out at the bottom. These would be the wings coming down. And they also sometimes branch out at the top. This is also the stigmata. This is the place in that on either side of that blue beam where people would see these sprites, these covering cherubs, who also cover over the Garden of Eden as well. And then it looks like blood is pouring down, like some kind of heavenly wound up in the sky. Sometimes people saw them differently. I'm just telling you one version, one perception that I know people have had. Others had looked up into the sky and saw a whole class of angels or aliens or light beings that were just standing over them wearing these long gowns or robes or capes or whatnot. Hey, Benjamin, thank you for the donation. That was very kind of you. Here's some more examples of the same types of things. These are called sprites, and these are what I believe are those other wounds. Not the one in the middle, not the Vesica Piscis, but on either side of it, electric phenomenon is going to change its nature because of what's happening in the atmosphere. And I'm going to explain to you what happens in the atmosphere too. Now, here's another medieval drawing of the wounds of Christ, the 5 wounds of Christ, typically. Now, you can see here the middle one, that would be the main Vesica Piscis with this little slit in the middle or whatever. And then you've got these other ones. You see the similarity between these things and the sprites themselves, right? Well, I mean, I'd say there's a strong, striking resemblance from the sprites that just flash in today's modern world and these that stayed in the atmosphere, that stayed up there and hung in the heavens as this light of the world looked like it was, suffering and about to die. And people knew that something was going to happen because they knew that whenever that light retracted, the world would go through a fallen state, that evil would enter into this world. And that's whenever Sauron or Satan or the devil actually rules the world, whenever it's hidden, when people can't see it, which is the days we live in right now. Now, here's another depiction of this, right? You got this little cartoonified heart-looking shape right there with the slit right there. And as you can see, it's right in the heart chakra, really, okay? Here's another one of the seraphim version of Jesus. There it is right there. Here's another version of it. Now, you might wonder what this mountain is, right? And why there's these monks and friars or whatever on this mountain. This symbolically is Mount Maru. This is where you will find Jesus. This is where you will find the light of the world. There's little lights, okay? There's little openings in the world all across the world, but none as large, none as tall, none as mighty, none as strong and powerful and life-giving and influential as that at the center of the world, the navel of the world, or also known as the axis mundi. Here it is again. Now, this one's of particular interest. You can see the high and lofty mountain in the background. You can see the golden sky. And they didn't just draw a golden sky because this is a holy relic and they wanted it to be gold. Okay, it had nothing to do with being pretty or anything. It's because that was the color that was predominant at the time. Now let's take a look at Jesus in this one. Now we look up and we see that they've put the cross. They've actually attached the staros, or the cross beam, and this part right here, right? So he's up there on the cross. You can see the wings coming down, and right above him, this is not a circular object. This is not a sphere. This is a dome, an inverted dome. This is the apex dome at the top of the firmament, which is at the middle of our world, right above Mount Maru. Here's another one of the winged version of Jesus, the golden background sky. I mean, clearly they had blue and stuff, you know what I mean? They had different colors. They could have drawn the sky as blue or even black if it was nighttime or whatever, but they didn't, right? They drew it like this because people saw the firmament. Okay, the firmament is lit up by the lights that are erupting from the earth, and they shine upwards like great flashlights that show you the true nature of our world. Now here's Jesus up here with his wings, as you can see. Now these wings, they would come together sometimes and create a point. It almost looks like he's got like lobster claws right there. But they come together and they actually create the Vesica Piscis. Here's the stigmata. Okay, so this is the hand that reaches down from the heavens, that has that same type of wound that is bleeding, right? Now this is way up in the sky. So you have to imagine this blood, if it is up in the sky, if this is an event that happens and people saw it in the atmosphere, that this blood would rain down. We'll come back to the blood rain. There's also news articles that have nothing to do with any type of religious imagery. People actually just drew strange events, strange happenings, anomalies they saw in the heavens, in the sky. Many different, there's hundreds of these. Okay, I just picked out this one because it actually shows the Vesica Piscis, or a portion thereof. Okay, and as you can see, all these little people down here that are watching, they drew all these people that were in awe. This dude broke his leg. I don't know what happened right there. Oh, maybe these people are lined up to be healed. Look, it's a hunchback. You see that? Hold on, I'm just now seeing this for the first time. Check that out. So this dude's a hunchback. That's a blemmy, by the way. I think blemmies are hunchbacks. But yeah, these look like people who are infirm and in need of healing and stuff. Possibly. Yeah, this guy too. Okay, this is making a lot more sense to me. All right, so you got the infirm, the sick, right? And they're all on this path that goes towards these strange lights that are being seen in the heavens, because these are signs, and people knew that when you saw these signs to go there, right? The wise men followed the light in the sky for several days. People would line up because these were places of healing. These lights that I'm going to show you, that I'm talking about, they were able to heal people because of the electromagnetics. They would actually, they get rid of bacteria. They kill off bacteria. They have the ability to regenerate your collagen, your elastin, to allow your skin to not die and to become stretchy and wrinkly and stuff like that. Literally the fountain of youth. And people saw these types of things time and time again. Here's another one, the Vesica Piscis with Jesus right there in the middle. Now, sometimes they combine the figure of Jesus with the eye in the sky. Not the Vesica Piscis eye, but the actual round eye that is up there, which is the apex dome, which I've showed you a glimpse of time and time again here. There's a good reason for that, but I'm going to save that for another video. I've touched on Jesus being sucked up into the apex dome, eaten by Kronos, metaphorically, and that'll be the next video that we do. So stay tuned for that one. Here it is again, Jesus with the Vesica Piscis standing right in the middle, or Mary with Jesus, I should say. And here he is again with the same 4 living creatures on either side, right? Exactly where those wounds would be. So this one over here is like a flying bull. This one over here is actually, this is a creature that they used to have, like a phantazoid or a cryptid in Asia. You'll still see statues of this one all over the place, just without wings. Here's many different drawings of it, okay? All these little angels, all these little cherubs or heads that have wings on either side or whatever, they're symbolically representing electromagnetics, balls of light, actual toroids that are visible because the gases are excited and they become light. And this one is, sometimes they put it right there into the cathedrals and stuff on the sides. And this isn't just Christianity. You can see clearly there's elements of like Buddhism and other religions as well. Islam, they also have their version of this too. Now this one right here, they put this in the middle or on the top of this tree or this plant of some sort. It's actually a tree. They had some weird trees that they drew during the Dark Ages. This one features Jesus in the Vesica Piscis in the middle of this tree, at the top of this tree. You see that? And that's because that's the tree of life. Okay, that beam, that's this color right here. It's like a bluish green that changes color depending on the altitude and the types of gases that are being ionized. So for example, oxygen is being released from the earth. Oxygen at low levels and even within the earth will ionize green. That's why the abode of the dead, Hades and whatnot, is always this green magic or green fire or whatever. But whenever that plasma goes higher up, because this is a beam of light that's traveling upwards, okay? The higher up it gets, it's going to start changing colors. And that's why the Phoenix has all those different colors and stuff too. But it starts off green, then it will start turning into a blue color. And when it gets really high up, like around the Vesica Piscis area, the nitrogen will be activated and the nitrogen will glow red. And then way high up in the sky, you'll have hydrogen, and that'll be red too. The nitrogen's probably more of a magenta color in its truest form, and hydrogen's more of a deep red color. Now, here we got the same exact thing. Jesus right in the middle, the four creatures, four angels that have wings that are flying around up there on either side of him. Here it is again. This time it's personified and cartoonified as this type of symbolism, where clearly you can see that they have the all-seeing eye, right, of Freemasonic lore, the triangle and the eye. That's actually the apex dome up there. And if that's the apex dome, that means this is not. This is something altogether different. This is the evil eye. Okay, why? Because ionized hydrogen pours out of that thing whenever the dome opens up and it cracks open. And ionized hydrogen is no joke. It will bond with all kinds of things and will change the bonds of all kinds of things. But then below that, we have that wound, the wound of Christ down there. And then these people happily burning in fire, whatever's going on down there. It's Hades right below that. Now here it is in Islam, here it is in the tarot deck, and here it is within Christianity. As you can see, similarities across the board. Why? Because there's a truth to this shape. There's a truth to this saint or an angel or something that's good in the middle of this Vesica Piscis. Many different versions of Mary in the center of it, right? And you can see it's clearly different than the apex dome itself, especially in this one right here. You see that one on the side? That's the apex dome. When you see all this cloud and smoke around God or whatever up there in the heavens, that's depressurization, creating all this fog and mist and stuff like that. But it's clearly separate from the Vesica Piscis, which is a good thing. It's a good type of energy, basically. It's a life-giving energy. All right, we'll come back to that one. Now, Jesus was also known and is today symbolized by the symbol of a fish, right? Sort of a stick fish, right? Sort of the stick fish drawing. It's funny because they don't typically put like the actual end of the tail right here. Oftentimes, they'll just leave it like that, and it makes this Vesica Piscis. In the ancient times, they would put a line right through the middle of this fish, which is the Vesica Piscis, and this represented Jesus. This is how the ancient Christian people drew Jesus. Now, that story today takes on a different connotation. Over time, stories tend to change and stuff. So today the story is that the Christians were being hunted and stuff, so they had to hide the real image of Jesus and just represent him by the fish shape or whatever, which that's fine. But I have an alternative view on that. This is the exact same thing, okay? This is not a planet. This is not ancient Saturn that people saw in the sky or anything. This is the same thing, the Vesica Piscis, the circle up there in the sky, and the beam that is shooting right up through it. This is Jesus. That one line, the straight and narrow path, that is Jesus, okay? A beam of energy that's shooting up, and it's creating this loop around it. Interesting. Now we see this many times in petroglyphs where you have a character that looks like, a stick figure person that's standing maybe with their arms on their sides is how that's being, personified. I'm just guessing that some people would say, oh, those must be his arms and he must be putting his arms on his side. Those are not his arms. That's a hole. That's a loop. It's a circle, and he's standing within the circle, and I'll show you exactly why. It's because he's at the center of something very powerful. Now, it was also drawn like this. This is also your peace sign. You'll see this all the time, the circle, the line that goes down, it splits off into two right there, right? I like to think of it as Mount Maru and the beam that shoots up from Mount Maru, bringing peace to the world. Let me make this a little bigger before we move on so you can just check it out. Now, you'll notice at the top, this person's head has like a little duck beak. You'll also see some stuff like that. You'll also notice the fingers are usually like irregularly spread out. They always draw these stick figures with like real long, strange figures. Oftentimes people think that they're aliens with real long fingers or something, but they're not. They're electricity, and it stretches out far. Here's another version of the same thing. This time they've put the legs on it. Now, depending on your position on the Earth and how far away you are from the North Pole, you'll see it from different angles. You will always see this loop that goes around the center of this pole. Okay? You'll always see that. Maybe with the exception of if you're in Australia or Antarctica, I don't know. You might just see the very top. Okay? But if you're closer, you'll be able to see these legs that bow down. All right, this is the dome that goes over the Garden of Eden. It's a plasma sheath that protects the entire island. And this is the beam of light that shoots up from the center of the Garden of Eden, and it goes all the way up here. This is not a snake. This is a snake in the sky, all right, which is plasma. It's a plasma snake. But this is the image of Jesus. He's not putting his hands on his hips. He's standing in a circle. Sometimes it was drawn as like a hula hoop. Some people think it's a hula hoop or something. Here's another version. Now, this is an ancient drawing, a Christian drawing, actually, that shows the fish, or the Pisces, right, on either side, acting as two witnesses, to a central beam that's coming up out of the water, which, if you look on ancient maps, especially those from the Middle Ages, at the center of the world, at the North Pole, there is a magnetic mountain that is born out of the water, that comes up out of a pure lake of, fresh waters. Anyways, so this cross shape is shooting all the way up, and you have that circle up there again with the little Eye of Sauron slit, right? It's not the Eye of Sauron, but just so you know, I'm just making a comparison so you can get a mental picture. Over here, we actually have the mountain, okay? So you have like a Mount Maru type deal over here. And then you'll see and notice, remember I showed you to pay attention to those balls that are connected by lines? There's these lines that go up and then they make like a circle and then another line and another circle. I'll show you what that is right now. So over here you can see more Mount Maru symbolism. This is Jacob's ladder. So whenever that beam shoots up, initially it's just a line. Initially it's just a beam. It's a straight beam. But as it starts to move and interact with the atmosphere over time, then it starts to create instabilities. These are what are known as plasma instabilities within plasma physics, right? So you have this beam of light and it's shooting up and it's creating these circles. But we also need to think, and it helps me to think, three-dimensionally instead of two-dimensionally. These are not circles. Many people say these are like planets and all kinds of stuff. They're not. This is one thing people saw in the heavens. And they draw it over and over in different ways as it changed shape. Because it does change shape. It's a shapeshifter, which is plasma, right? So this beam of light shoots high up into the sky, creating Jacob's ladder. It can create, depending on where you are, like I said, your perspective, you might see straight lines that go up, but you also might see the circles, depending on how close you are to it. You might be able to open it up a bit and see the circles within it. These are chakras. They are the chakras of Jesus. They are the energetic points within his body. Okay, or that blue beam, all right, they're created. These are also within you, every single one of you. Me right now, this is happening to me right now. Now, going around this, these are created by a toroidal field, or a torus. It's a torus shape. Essentially, it's the exact shape as a donut, okay? So everyone knows what a donut looks like, or a tire, but a donut is closer, okay? Now, you can see there's this donut shape that goes around. The middle of it is hollow. The middle is where all the most of the energy travels. Depending on the polarity or the direction of flow, the energy might go downward. In this case, it would be retracting down into the earth and flowing in a downward direction, which I believe this is what our chakras truly look like today, that the energy is coming down from the top of the head and going all the way down to the bottom. because that's where the energy is going in the world, is from the top to the hollow earth. But whenever the polarity reverses direction, then it will go from the bottom towards the top and come up towards the top. And that leads to an age of enlightenment, and, you know, all kinds of powers and mental abilities like telepathy and stuff. Here it is again. Sometimes people would put faces on them, right? Sometimes I would just draw the beam of light. So this is the same thing, the Vesica Piscis, the Eye of Sauron type shape or whatever that we saw that was drawn during the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. Sometimes I put faces on these things. This is the face of Jesus, okay? Symbolically, I'll say. It's the face of Jesus, okay? Not a human being, flesh and blood or whatever, but a light being, right? The light of the world. And here it is again. People saw this, and so they would draw it on the rocks. This was historic, okay? So they knew this was important. I'm guessing these were survivors that drew this, because this would be something new to them. So when you transition, many of you, this will happen to you, okay? I believe that this is going to happen soon, okay? I feel like it's going to happen in my lifetime, but that's what everybody says. I don't know, but I sure hope it does, okay? If it does, and you survive this, the sky will no longer be this blue color as you see here. Everything will be renewed. Everything will be refreshed. Everything will be altogether changed. And people will see the beams of light and circles and energetic fields and cherubs and cherubim and seraphim and strange shapes in the sky. And people will etch them down and start drawing them, you know. And here it is again. You got the dots. These are the chakras of the body of Jesus. This is also the spine of Osiris. So within ancient Egyptian culture and history, the Osiris was the foremost of the Westerners, and West was down inside of the earth back then, right? This beam of light shoots up from within the earth, or the greatest opening in the earth, which is at the North Pole at Mount Maru in Hyperborea. And it shoots up and it creates the chakras, or the spinal columns of the god Osiris, who is also depicted as like a bluish green color all the time. And that's the reason, because that's actually the color that he was. Here's another one. This time you can kind of see the eye symbolism right there in the middle, shooting upwards. There's some horns at the top. Here's a perfect one. This is one of my favorite examples of the hula hoop figure, right? The priest or the shaman who seems to be holding on to some sort of a hula hoop, or, you know, people might assume that this was actually a ring that they wore when their humans were dancing about, calling for rain or whatever it was. But this is not a human. Look at it, okay? This is not a human being. This is a personification of an anomaly that people didn't understand. And so they projected themselves and things they did understand onto it to make sense of it. That's cartoonification. But this right here is especially important, because this is the most powerful thing on Earth. This is the most powerful thing that we have within this closed system and contained world. And this has the ability to create. I'll show you what it is. It is this. This is called a toroid, or a torus field. Okay? There's a human in there, and as it should be, because every single one of you has these. You're made of this, okay? In the image of God, you are made, according to, you know, all the legends and religions and stuff like that. And the first man, or the Adam Kadmon within, you know, Jewish lore, was a light being that had these chakras, these pillars. It was a beam of light that had pillars. And this is how it's actually literally described within Judaism. Especially within, you know, the occult mysteries of Judaism. They talk about the first man, and it wasn't the fleshly Adam and Eve, it was the one before that, which is the light being. And people saw this in the heavens. It manifested in the sky. That's how strong the electrical power was, that they saw this up there in the heavens. This is also the true shape of the Holy Grail, or the cup that caught the blood of Jesus. Now, this one's of particular interest. This acts as Jesus, with the backdrop being the apex dome. So this is from the perspective of down below in the Garden of Eden, looking straight up, and you can see, or maybe slightly to the side like, and you could see it's the Grail shape, right? Now, the true Grail that actually catches the blood of Jesus, which I'll explain to you as well, the word Grail means crater, right? And the land directly below these images that I'm showing you at the North Pole, Hyperborea, the Garden of Eden, is a crater shape. It's a valley, Okay, it's surrounded by mountains and stuff. And that caught the stuff that rained down, which I'll talk about towards the end. Now, oftentimes, it was also depicted as a lizard and many other different animals, okay? Sometimes people did the phoenix, sometimes the bird that has its bottom legs all spread out like it's roadkill or something. Sometimes it was people. I saw a meme on the internet where they were showing these stick figures, but they were people stick figures, and they saw the line in between the legs, and they were like, wow, people were swinging back then or whatever. Well, there's a good reason why it has a line in the middle. People saw this, and some people thought it looked like a lizard. It's the Vesica Piscis in the middle, okay, and it's got the the energy coming off the sides at the top and the bottom here, and then this is the beam that shoots up in the middle. And if you keep going all the way up, you can see that there's circles on either side. I'll show you what those circles are. This is the apex dome at the top. This is the doom shape, or the shape of the dome. It was also drawn as a fish, like we've talked about many times, right? This is way down in Australia, in Kimberley, Australia, where they would only see the top portion of these things. They wouldn't see like probably the lower portion of the legs and the beam and stuff like that. And then this up here is not the sun. This would be the apex dome. That's why it's red. But you can see the head of the lizard here, the exact same as the head of the fish, right? And here's Jesus. And I just wanted to point this out real quick. Oftentimes people think this is a halo behind him. This is not a halo that's behind him. This is called the Orbis Cruciger, I think is what it's called, right? The cross in the circle or whatnot. Now, I just wanted to show you an image. I was just kind of doodling, okay? And let's say that you're in the Garden of Eden, you're looking up, and you can see the apex dome directly above, that portion of the firmament that bows downwards, right? If it's a reflective surface and it's being lit up, it's going to reflect the land that is directly below it. Depending on your angle to it, you'll see a portion of that land or all of that land in its entirety. Sometimes people looked up and they saw, the doom shape with a true X and then a circle in the middle or whatever. Sometimes people that lived off to the side would be looking at an angle, and so they would only see a portion of that land. Here it is again with the lizard shape, roadkill. You know what I mean? This is the classical roadkill. I mean, lizards don't look like that. You know what I mean? So it's not a lizard at all. These are sprites, probably. That's my theory. That's my working theory on that right now. Now, this right here starts off as the beam that comes from Mount Maru. But you've got to think about perspective. And I'll show you. I drew an image of the perspective for you, right? So you can see the sprites there. The 5 wounds of Jesus right there compared to those things. Now here's a perspective view. Okay, think about this. Let's say that this down here at the bottom is Mount Maru, or Wolf Mountain, because it looks like a wolf howling up at the moon, which is the origin of that story. When the beam comes out of it, right, it will be only big enough to come out of the mountain, right? But as it goes up, it will spread out. However, when it gets to a certain distance and far enough away because of perspective, it'll get so far away that it'll start shrinking back in, or it'll appear to be getting smaller and smaller up there in the heavens, giving us the Vesica Piscis shape. Okay, when in reality, this is just a perspective. Now, what's created around it is this circle. Why? Because this is the torus field energetically that is going around this central shape right here. When I say I just drew the example of, the reflection up there behind me. So people might see something that looks quite like this, right? Or sometimes they drew it as eyes. They drew that same torus field as owl eyes or the mask of some shaman or god or something, when in reality, this is Mount Maru shooting up its beam that's splitting off into this torus field, and then people are seeing the residual effects of plasma instabilities on either side. This is actually three-dimensional. It wraps all the way around the nose portion right there. Okay, so this is a donut around the nose right there. It's a donut of energy. And then, of course, it branches out at the top. So I drew these wings, these little feathery wings. This is the feathered serpent. Okay, this is the cosmic bird of creation and the phoenix and so on and so forth. And here's what it looks like energetically. Okay, so this is a diagram of a toroidal field and the path that the energy takes. In this particular example, the energy is wrapping around the top, coming downward, inwards, and then separating outwards. In the middle is going to be the most powerful point. Okay, the most energy right there in the center, or a star right there in the center. And of course, you can reverse the direction by reversing the polarity, in which case the energy would come up. I could just flip this upside down and it would show you what would happen if you reverse the polarity on it. But you can clearly see the Jesus fish. You can clearly see the Vesica Piscis right there in the center. And people saw this in the ancient world. This is how they drew it. This is how they depicted these things. Now, in a laboratory, people that actually are active physicists and scientists that practice plasma physics, they have estimated what they should see whenever they shoot a focused, dense beam of plasma, and how it might change depending on its environment and depending on how they interact. Sometimes they'll mess with it using magnets and stuff, okay, in layman's terms. So this is what it looks like. It's a beam of energy. It shoots up and it creates this coil or this toroidal field or this heavenly donut or forbidden donut, if you're a Simpsons fan, that wraps all the way around its body. Now, depending on your perspective, you might not see it from a top down, you might not see it's like, in an inner tube shape. You might just see it straight across, and you might see this is the most buildup on either side. So you see eyes, or you see circles or halos on either side. It might look something like this if you're off in the distance. Okay. So this would be underneath the Garden of Eden down here. This is Mount Maru, would be shooting this blue beam upwards, and it branches out at the top, and right in the middle is the toroidal field that would give you those circles. I just put the toroidal field and overlaid it there for you so you can get an idea of what it might look like. And it seeps into our pop culture. Okay, this is from a movie that I decoded called Everything Everywhere All at Once, and the most powerful thing in the universe in that movie was a bagel. A bagel in the sky. And this is on Earth. Okay, so here their movies are showing you the reality. There's all this stuff floating around. This woman put everything on a bagel. But in reality, this is a depressurization event. And this is all stuff, debris from the surface of the Earth that's getting sucked up and floating upwards whenever the sky depressurizes. Hold on, let me back up. For those of you who don't know, if we live in a closed system and that system is pressurized and one day it depressurizes or opens up and the firmament breaks, then it will create an influx and a strong force of buoyancy on everything here on the surface. And what that means is things will float, okay? So everything, especially in this area, is going to float or get sucked up into the sky. So this is an image from the movie. They're cartoonifying it as a bagel or a heavenly bagel or whatever. And you can see it's surrounded by the clouds up there because of the depressurization and whatnot. There it is again, just an image. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. So check this out. Hold on, let me make this a little smaller. So this is the image of Jesus hanging on the cross, but then we've got these two balls on either side, being the halos of these two people, these two women, probably right next to him, right? And it's the exact same as this right here. And this is how it's depicted many different times, depending on at what point in time you're looking at during the life cycle of this beam of energy that is shooting up from the center of the Earth. So people would draw it in different ways, you see? And sometimes, I really like these different artists' impressions that people have done of this, right? Sometimes they call this the squatter man, Atlas pose, plasma man, plasma stick figure, and however, okay? And these are all the different images that people have drawn, different ways that they've drawn it, right? The thunderbolts of the god, or gods, Zeus, etc. Various petroglyphs show this exact same thing over time. It goes across every culture, every history, every religion across the world that I've ever come across. This is a book by a man named Carlos Castaneda, and he's written many different books, and I really enjoy these books. I read them long ago. Basically, this guy sat down with a Mexican shaman or a witch doctor who actually did different types of medicinal plant drugs and stuff and taught this American how to see into the spirit world and how to interact and how to be a shaman and how to be a wizard, basically. So at one point he was learning, how to see into the spirit world, and he became so adept at it under the guidance of this witch doctor named Don Juan. He became so adept that when he didn't even need the drugs after a while. Okay, he could sense these things, but he would look at people and he saw that people were walking around wrapped in what he called like a luminous egg shape, right? And there's different levels to our spiritual nature. So like chakras and all that type of stuff, right? But around the whole body is what most people call an aura. The aura is like the shape of the Vesica Piscis. Maybe not so pointy, I don't know, but he called it a luminous egg shape. So I'll read you just a portion of the book here. It's pretty interesting. He says, when this interruption occurs, sorcerers claim that energy can be perceived directly as it flows into the universe. Sorcerers describe perceiving energy directly as having the effect of seeing it with the eyes, although the eyes are only minimally involved. So when they talk about seeing, it's not so much seeing with your eyes. That's why blind people are, oftentimes, especially in the movies and stuff, they tend to be like, have powers and, telepathy and stuff like that. They're seeing with their spirit body, not with their mind per se. Okay, that's a part of it, but they're reaching out with their very spirit, their very energy, their very aura, and interacting with the auras of other things that are around them. This is to perceive through the spirit. To perceive energy directly allowed the sorcerers of Don Juan's lineage to see human beings as conglomerates of energy fields that have the appearance of luminous balls. Observing human beings in such a fashion allowed those shamans to draw extraordinary energetic conclusions. They noticed that each of those luminous balls is individually connected to an energetic mass of inconceivable proportions that exists in the universe. This is our connection to the tree of life. Okay? We are all, those of us who understand what I'm talking about, you're connected. You have that seed of that energy, that same residual frequency in you as the core of who you are. You're an extension of Jesus, or you're an extension of the Axis Mundi, or the Tree of Life, or however you want to see it. A mass which they called the Dark Sea of Awareness, which I thought was an interesting way to put that, considering that there's a dark lake at the middle of the world. What the shamans of ancient Mexico found out when they focused their seeing on the Dark Sea of Awareness was the revelation that the entire cosmos is made of luminous filaments that extend themselves infinitely. These are what I call plasma filaments, and they extend beyond our world. Our world is actually wrapped in a large plasma filament, which is just a long hallway of light and energy that goes to other worlds and stuff. It's personified and it's cartoonified in movies all of the time as the circuits of time, or like, what do you call it? Like wormholes and tunnels of light and plasma and stuff like that. That's what exists beyond our world. It's like a spaghetti space, okay? But the spaghetti is not spaghetti. It's strands of plasma filaments. Anyways, back to the shape, right? So now let's talk about the blood rain real quick. All right. We've got this Vesica Piscis shape, this wound at the heart chakra, or the center of this cosmic stick figure, or this plasma figure, this Atlas type, this Jesus type, that's a beam of energy shooting up from the earth, terrestrial, good, life-giving energy. And out of it pours, according to the biblical story, blood and water, or blood mixed with water, red blood, blood rain. Because think about this, right? Oftentimes they show Jesus as being way bigger than all the other people, especially those pictures that are from the Middle Ages or whatever. If this is something that is titanic in nature and not down here like a 5'5" human being or whatever, but somebody that, an entity that extends up to the very dome itself, then we would expect to feel the repercussions down here on Earth. And we do. From these wounds, right? These wounds interact with the atmosphere. They interact with what's happening up there in the fluid that we breathe called air, basically, right? And that air is comprised of different things and layers itself out and stuff the higher up you go, okay? So here we have a picture. Let's get back to the actual Jesus. This is a gigantic Jesus, right? And a tiny little human down here. They're showing you how large this is, or trying to give you a scale of the image, right? And it's not just Jesus that is just all battered and bruised and stuff, but it's just raining blood everywhere, right? This says Inri up here. This is just I don't want to get off topic. Anyways, it's just blood that's raining all over the place. So it's also raining down upon Jesus himself, right? It's raining down on this priest. Blood rain that happens during these events. Do we have instances of blood rain, especially during, you know, times of light that we're told are actually dark ages? We do. Many times. Actually, you can find this all over the place. And it rained down so much blood that the rivers turned into blood and the water started turning into blood. And up here we have like the apex dome. See how it's like got that Humpty Dumpty collar that I was teaching you guys about during our last movie decode? So all this blood starts raining down. But is it blood? No, it's not blood. It's like blood, I guess you could say, because as above, so below. Here's another news article from the Middle Ages, from what looks like maybe the area of the North countries, maybe northern Germany, Poland, somewhere around there, I don't know. But it was raining blood, right? There's many different instances of it raining blood. Why? Well, here's what happens. Here's my theory on why it rains blood and why it's going to rain blood again, okay? The world across. Everything is going to become a dingy, post-apocalyptic, orangey, rusty red. Everything in this world. It'll change over time, but it's going to revert back to that color. Now, what happens whenever the inner earth depressurizes? All those gases come up through the openings. Many of those openings come in the form of what we call volcanoes, right? Every volcano on Earth will explode. Every single one of them. Not to worry, because like I said, everything is floating. So it's all getting sucked up into the sky. The Earth is cleansing itself. It's getting rid of all of the lava. It's getting rid of all the debris and trash and all the pollution and all that stuff. It's getting rid of it, okay? So I know it sounds scary that all of them would erupt, and yes, in some ways that is scary to some people, but the more you learn, the less afraid you'll be, okay? So what happens whenever all of the volcanoes are erupting, right? And all the wind is coming up from the zephyrs of the inner earth. It's blowing all this dirt and debris and dust in particular, especially dust that has elements of metals like iron. And it's blowing it high up into the atmosphere, and that dust and that ash is mixing with a new kind of atmosphere, which is called the vapor canopy. Our whole entire atmosphere becomes vaporous and wet. It's a very wet time, which is how the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages were also depicted. Very swampy, very wet, fog all over the place. That's because this was happening. Stuff like this was happening. Now, when you mix all that ash and you throw all that dust and debris up into the air and you mix it with the fog, right? And then you throw in some extra elements like a beam of energy or ionized oxygen, right? When they come in contact with the ionized beams of oxygen around the world, because it's not just one, there's many. It's just that Maru is the largest one, right? It oxidizes the dust. It oxidizes all that dirt and debris and stuff, and it turns it literally into rust. Okay, it's called oxidation, right? And it looks more like this. The atmosphere becomes foggy. Everything turns red. These are when the red lights of our world show up to tell you you're living during dangerous times, right? This is the times whenever otherworldly creatures are going to come up from the bowels of the earth and probably drop down from the heavens as well, according to the legends and the myths. But this is how the world will look, right? And that red color is caused by the blue or the bluish green beams of light that shoot up from the earth during the vapor canopy. And all this dirt and all this debris is mixing together and it rains down, right? Because you've got all those water particles from the vapor and the mist and the fog and stuff, and they're going to mix with all that dust that's becoming oxidized, which is turning into rust instantly, right? And it's going to turn into a wet red substance, and it's going to rain down on the people, and it's going to rain down blood red rain all over everybody. And this has happened many different times, and it's been cataloged, and people have experienced it all over the place and wondered at it every time as a sign of the apocalypse, because they should. Because it is a sign of the apocalypse. This one right here is actually really interesting because you also have mutants. This is like a two-headed cow or something off here to the side, which is truth in video games. I don't want to get too off topic, but there's a game called Fallout where they actually have these cattle called Brahmins, which are two-headed mutant cattle. There's a lot of mutations that happen, especially up towards the north. Whenever these things happen, humans mutate, animals mutate, because there's a lot of radioactivity. There's electromagnetics is on high in the atmosphere, and the only real safe place is in the Garden of Eden, because you're actually protected from that radioactivity by the plasma sheath that surrounds that garden, or Hyperborea. But people looked up in the sky and they saw Jesus on a cross, or Odin on a tree, or however you'd like to see it, or personify it, or cartoonify it, or however you like to. If you believe in the actual physical stories as literally happening and stuff, that's totally fine too. Okay, I'm not trying to, change anyone's perspectives or religions or anything. Okay, I'm just sharing my path with you. Okay, which is that people looked up into the sky and they saw these strange things, like this right here. This right here is obviously a sprite. Okay, and then you got pillars and columns and smokeless fire and jinns and genies and gods and demigods and angels and all kinds of things. This one's actually going to lead us into our next video, which is Jesus getting sucked up into the sky and hanging from the firmament itself. There's a lot of interesting depictions of that one as well. And this one's interesting too. This is also the dome. This is the apex dome. I don't know why I included this. I just probably forgot to take it out. But this is way down in Australia. This is the apex dome. This is the doom shape. And people drew it. And this is the highest point. This is the highest point in the sky. So definitely in Australia, they could see this. What's up, Mike? Welcome to my channel. And that's the story of why and the connection with Jesus and the Eye of Sauron, right? The Vesica Piscis, the good eye, you could say, and not the all-seeing eye that is way up there at the top of the world. I hope that you guys enjoyed this particular presentation. I had fun studying and putting these images together and researching, especially those things that happened during the Dark Ages. If you liked the presentation, let me know in the comments. Just let me know, what part you found the most interesting or what you got from it. I love knowing that, what I'm doing has some effect and adds value to people's lives. Thanks for joining me on this presentation. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
In a time when an ancient cataclysm is about to return, one book holds the key to unlocking the biggest secret in all of history. JayDreamerZ presents Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse. Study it, and you'll discover the very real details behind the reoccurring event that resets civilizations and reshapes the entire world. Bridging the gap between fiction and fact, this book is a must-have for all truth seekers. Then in his second book, you'll learn about the one place of refuge from this world storm. You'll explore the ends of the earth, find the fountain of youth, and envision yourself enveloped in the vapor canopy. In Ancient Oblivion, Return to Hyperborea, available now. Order direct from JayDreamerZ and receive your very own autographed copy. Go to JayDreamerZ.com for more information on our Ancient Oblivion and the Plasma Apocalypse, and sign up for a free 24-hour cram session with a complimentary day pass. The end is near, so order now before it's too late.
But something's forcing me to stay. Who